There are stories that begin in darkness, and there are those that begin before darkness was ever born. Long before the world was shaped, before stone and sea and sky took form, there was only the music, the great song of Eru Ilúvatar. And in that endless harmony dwelt beings of pure thought and flame, the Ainur, eldest of creation, who sang the world into being. Among them were those who loved the brilliance of creation, and those who sought to master it. When Melkor rose in pride, his song turned to discord, and many of the fiery spirits followed him into ruin. Thus were born the Balrogs, once radiant, now consumed by shadow. But not all fell. One spirit of flame chose humility over power, mercy over pride. He would walk the world in mortal form, bearing both wisdom and sorrow. Olórin, whom men would name Gandalf. And though ages would pass and the stars would fade, he would one day face again the fire that had once been his kin, not with hatred, but with remembrance. This is the story of why Gandalf feared the Balrogs. Before we continue further, if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, it would mean the world and help us share more tales of Arda. Now, let's return to the story. Chapter 1: The Fire Before the Flame. In the beginning, when the thought of Eru Ilúvatar moved upon the void, countless spirits awoke to his music. They were the Ainur, children of his thought, and among them were those lesser in might, yet rich in spirit, the Maiar. They were the hands of the Valar, the whisperers of the winds, the keepers of light and flame. Among them was one named Olórin, gentle, wise, humble beyond his measure. His light did not blaze as some did. It shimmered softly, like dawn seen through morning mist. And there were others, spirits of burning heart and boundless energy, who loved the fierce dance of the Flame Imperishable. They were drawn to it as moths to a star. Among them was one named Maiar, golden and perfect in craft. And with him others who delighted in his brilliance, bold, mighty spirits of fire. Their names once sung in joy, long before the world was marred. In those first ages, Olórin walked often among them. He listened to their laughter, saw how their lights wove together into the tapestry of creation. They were brothers and sisters in the song, born of one thought, each with a purpose. He had spoken once to one who would later be called Gothmog, when the name still meant voice of fire, and not terror of the Valar. The fire is a gift, Olórin had said softly. It warms and gives light, but left alone, it consumes. You speak as though flame could ever be contained, the other had laughed, bright and proud. We were made for burning. The Flame Imperishable is our inheritance. It is Eru's gift, Olórin had replied, sorrow shadowing his voice even then. And there, perhaps, the first difference was born. A small thing, a seed of shadow yet to sprout. But the music changed. The great theme trembled when Melkor, mightiest of the Ainur, raised his voice against it. Discord entered the world, and the harmony cracked. Those who loved power were drawn to him, their light bending beneath his will. Among them were the spirits of flame. Olórin watched as one by one, the fires he had once admired turned cruel and hungry. Their beauty hardened into wrath, their brilliance into ruin. And though the world was not yet made, sorrow entered his heart for the first time. He had glimpsed what would come. Fire turned to scourge, light turned to torment. And so the Maiar of flame fell into shadow, and the world waited to be born.
Chapter 2. When the light was broken. When the world took shape, mountains rose, seas spread wide, and stars were kindled. Yet beneath that splendor, the seeds of ruin took root. In the first fires of Arda, the Balrogs awoke. No longer were they the bright spirits who danced in the early light. They had become fire clothed in shadow, bound to Melkor's hatred. Their light was a wound upon the world. Where they walked, forests withered and stones screamed. Their whips of flame tore through the air, and their laughter echoed like the breaking of mountains. And Olórin, who dwelt then in Lórien, heard whispers of their coming, and wept. He had seen them before the fall, and he knew what they had lost. Each Balrog was not merely a beast of fire, each was a ruin of a spirit once radiant. When the Valar made war upon Melkor in the days before the sun, Olórin stood beside them. He saw the Balrogs emerge from the pits of Utumno, roaring with ancient might. They struck down Eonwe's host, their flames unquenchable. Even the Valar themselves feared their wrath. And in that chaos, Olórin felt something deeper than fear: recognition. He saw in them the mirror of what he might have been, for he too was born of flame, though his burned quietly within. He too could have followed pride, could have mistaken creation for dominion. But he had chosen humility. They had chosen glory. Pride was the first fire to fall, he murmured once, long after the battle was won, and it burns still. The Balrogs were driven into the depths of the world when Melkor was cast down. Yet Olórin knew, as all who had seen the beginning knew, that fire does not die so easily. It sleeps, buried beneath stone and time, waiting for the breath that will wake it again. So he waited too. Through the long ages of the world, he waited, and feared the day when that fire would rise once more. Chapter 3. The Grey Pilgrim's Burden. Ages passed, the stars dimmed, kingdoms rose and fell, and Olórin came again to Middle-earth, no longer as a spirit of light, but as a man in gray. He came not in power, but in patience, clothed in frailty, that the hearts of men might not fear him. The Valar had sent him thus, to guide, not to rule. But in the quiet of night, when the wind sighed through the pines and the fire burned low, Gandalf the Grey remembered. He remembered the fires of old, the shadows that moved beneath the mountains, the echo of a whip cracking in the dark. He did not speak of it, not even to Elrond or Galadriel, for they had seen much, but not as he had seen. The first light before it broke, the first fire before it devoured. When word reached him that a darkness stirred again beneath the misty mountains, his heart turned cold. Durin's bane, the dwarves had whispered. A shadow of fire, said the elves. Something ancient, murmured Gandalf, and terrible. He knew what it was before he saw it. He had feared this moment all his long years, the waking of one of the fallen brethren. It was not hatred that filled him, it was sorrow. For he knew that within that beast still burned the remnant of a mind that had once sung beside him in the halls of Eru. The same voice that had laughed in the light of creation would now roar in flame and ruin. And Gandalf, who was once Olórin, must go to meet it. If I do not return, he said quietly to Aragorn and the others, you will know that I have found what I sought. He smiled, though his eyes were heavy with grief. For some fires, he whispered, can only be met by flame.
Chapter 4. The Fire in the Deep. The drums began in the dark. Doom, doom. The sound rolled through stone like the heartbeat of the deep earth. The fellowship fled across the bridge of Khazad-dûm, and the shadow came after, vast, terrible, alive with ancient wrath. A shape of fire and smoke, wings of shadow spread wide. The Balrogs strode forth, and all light seemed to recoil before it. Gandalf turned, staff raised, sword gleaming faintly in the red gloom. For a moment, just a moment, the flame before him flickered with memory. He saw not a monster, but the echo of what had been. A Maiar of fire, radiant and proud, laughing in the dawn of the world. And he felt, as only the wise can feel, the deep ache of recognition. "You cannot pass," Gandalf said, voice steady though sorrow burned behind it. "I am a servant of the secret fire," he cried, "wielder of the flame of Anor." The Balrog's answer was a roar, not words, but fury, shame, and pain. They met upon the narrow bridge, fire against light, shadow against hope. The bridge cracked, stone fell into the abyss. "Go back to the shadow," Gandalf cried. "You shall not pass." And as the bridge broke beneath them, Gandalf saw, in the heart of that fire, a glimmer of what had been lost. A flicker of regret, a whisper of the old song. He would never know. The Balrog fell, and Gandalf with it. Down they plunged through smoke and flame, through tunnels older than memory. Falling, fighting, burning, until even the mountains shuddered with their wrath. And in that endless descent, Gandalf thought not of death, but of redemption. If fire must end fire, he thought, then let it end thus. Chapter 5. The White Flame Reborn. He did not remember the moment he died, only that the fire became light, white, pure, endless. He had passed beyond time, beyond form. He felt the touch of the One again, and heard a voice, not of words, but of will. "You have not yet done all that you were meant to do." When he awoke upon the mountain peak, the world was silent. Snow lay around him, cooling the last embers of his battle. He was no longer the gray pilgrim. He was Gandalf the White, the fire that guides, not consumes. Where the Balrog's flame had devoured, his now purified. And though none could see it, the sorrow remained. For in destroying that ancient foe, he had destroyed a remnant of what he once loved, a being from the first dawn, lost beyond recall. He bore that sorrow quietly, as he bore all things. But within him now burned a different fire, not the wrath of the Valar, but the mercy of Eru. "For even ruin may teach," he said once to Frodo, gazing into the hearth, "and fire, though it devours, may also refine." Chapter 6. The Flame Imperishable. In the end, when the ring was unmade and the shadows fled, Gandalf stood once more upon the shores of Middle-earth. The sea wind touched his face, and he looked westward, toward the lands where all fire was first kindled. He thought of the Balrog then, of what it had been, of what it had become, of what he himself might have been. And he whispered into the wind, as if the world itself still listened. You were not made for ruin. None of us were. The sea carried his words away, over water and memory, to the undying lands beyond sight. And so ended the tale of Gandalf's fear, not of defeat nor of death, but of the reflection of his own kindred lost in flame. For in that fear was love, the sorrow of one who remembered what light had been before the world was broken. And though the Balrogs are gone and the mountains have cooled, their echo still trembles in the deep places of the world. Fire still burns in the hearts of men, and the choice remains, to devour or to guide. Thus the story passes into legend, like smoke fading into the dawn. And if you would hear more of the ancient days, of light and shadow, of mercy and might, join us again, for there are still many tales left to tell from the lands of Middle-earth.